Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first show for the month of November. November 1st, we are starting our series, our Black Conservatives, the Porters, on the train to racial inequality. Um, I always like to have something interesting to talk about, and I think this is a very unique topic. I've invited a few people, but right now it just seems to be me and my sidekick, Dr. Casey here. So
Hey, hey.
going on? What's that? Um, I thought this would be a very interesting topic, and like the previous topic, I sent a lot of feelers out last month and the month before, and of course, I always find out that it's a lot easier for people to say yes until Monday. Um, maybe, I was thinking that maybe I shouldn't forward the questions. Maybe I should just wait. And
That's what I would do.
that's, yeah, but, uh, but then, I get the feedback. Well, you ambushed me. Well, I can't ambush you if I send you the question.
I
I
mean,
mean,
you could send reference topics, but keep it at a minimum so that it leaves something for the mind to explore. If they coming on here, they already know what type of stuff you talk about, so it ain't too much of blindsiding you can do.
well, I mean, that was the point for it to be straightforward, point blank, and you know what you're coming to. I mean, uh, what do they call that? Transparency, I believe.
Yeah, but everybody don't know how to handle that.
I say,
A lot of people are more comfortable dealing with around the way talk and beating around the bush and indirect speaking.
well, what are your views on black conservatism? I
um
gave I gave a couple of what I thought modern day examples. If you read, of course, everybody points to Thomas Sowell. Uh, Out here in California, we recently had the Larry Elder thing about the recall. Libertarian turned Republican. Still haven't figured that one out yet. But you know, Senator Tim Scott. Um, I mean, are these examples of conservatism? And if they are, um, what can we do? Or, well, what is your example of a black conservative, or what do you think?
I mean, I don't know if you could really be a black conservative. You could be a Uncle Tom. You could try to fit into the narrative, but at the end of the day you kind of lose yourself within that. You have to become somebody else because you have to do, you know what I'm saying, kind of leave your people at the wayside. And so a lot of these people are just really trying to get in where you fit in. I mean, like, to be in the politics, you kind of gotta go with whatever the flow is that they get going on, or at least that has been the status quo up to this point.
Um, I've used a lot of those words, and been banned in a few places. But I wholeheartedly agree, and this is kind of where I'm at. When I have older people, I haven't run into many younger people yet. Well, I've run into one young man that supports the Republican Party, so I would have to consider him a black conservative.
I
But
mean, is just so having views that are in any way in alignment with the Republican Party make you a conservative?
Um,
Because the Democrats, I mean, like if you look at the history of what the Democratic Party, where it came from, it was actually opposite in the beginning. So
yes,
I mean, the narrative, none of the narrative actually fits the black culture for real, for real. It's just who's gonna make it sound the best.
right. I don't think that anyone is really under the delusion that either party has our best interests at heart. Uh,
There are some that are very delusional that went with this whole if you don't vote for Joe you ain't black mojo, and now he ain't did nothing for black people. So there are some people that really believe in the democratic system, and right now neither party is doing anything to make the real changes that need to be made to change the country overall.
well, first of all, I don't think a lot of people understand the democratic system. Um, just because you have, I mean, Obama was a perfect example. Everyone talks about what Obama didn't do, but it wasn't just up to Obama. He had
Mhm.
Mitch McConnell. He had other. Mitch McConnell said he'd only be a one-term president. So it's to me being conservative is all about finance. As long as you're able to accumulate your own and hoard it, then I'm good. But if I asked you to share some of your wealth, then all of a sudden I'm asking for welfare. I'm trying to take something from you, but 9 times out of 10, you've accumulated this by the sweat of somebody's brow. Very, there are very few. I mean, I don't know. The last Trump's son, I believe, had a job as a sports director. Never played sports in his life, or so. I mean, you don't have to necessarily spread things out anymore. I'm trying to think of a term other than socialism, um, but the democratic system itself means that more than one person is participating. You have supposedly different branches of government in charge of different things, and you progress by voting or passing bills. And it seems to me that we have as many people of our color against voting rights and against women's rights as we do, or as we have at any particular time. And remember, I come through the 70s, 78, 79. I mean, when we really had the least amount of representation, unless it was somebody once again that didn't look like me, but was very light skinned, or somebody they could point to and say, well, there's one. And I think we're almost back at that point now. Like I pointed, like Tim Scott, Larry Elder. I mean, and these are the people that are pointed out to us when it's once again, well, why aren't you like him?
I believe that there's a whole new wave of politicians coming in, because people are being more informed now than ever before of what it meant to be, what not what it's supposed to mean to be a politician versus what they've seen. So I believe that the narrative is at the point where it can change. In a way, in previous times, there was no way for it to change, but now you have more black people with money. You don't have to pick sides. You can go to the source. We can become the source.
D- But the fact that we don't have these young people out in front, do you think that this is kind of a
What
discouragement,
young
even to,
people?
excuse me?
What young people?
Precisely, that's what I'm saying. You're saying that the faces of politics have changed, but I mean,
I
actually,
said that it is changing. You have more people that's learning about politics more now than ever before. When it before nobody had the ideal that even being a politician was, you know what I'm saying, something that was feasible. Now the narrative is changing.
but but has that narrative, excuse me, but has that narrative attracted people of your age and younger? I mean,
Do you see more people out doing more to be heard now than ever before? The right now this is the most connected that the world has ever been.
but we see, you know, I keep going back to history because these are the same things that, you know, we were told in the 70s, 72, 70.
They didn't have the internet in the 70s though either.
Oh, I understand that, and like I said, the one thing that had the internet has changed when you look at the unrest now. We have learned not to burn down our own homes now, so and back in the 60s and 70s, we burned down my house to get at the landlord. We did learn now, like there, Santa Monica and Beverly, we learned about those things now. But when I had a family on here, biracial family, and um, one of the daughters goes to UC Berkeley, and we were talking about how young things do things differently now, and you were talking about the internet, and one thing that they were talking about is how they use TikTok. Like when uh, to get huge spaces at a Donald Trump rally, for instance, and then nobody shows up. You know, so they have their own way of sabotage using the internet, but are these effective weapons to use economically and socially? Click.
Did you see the impact? Did you see the impact that they had when nobody was buying, nobody bought anything? Like if black people use the internet correctly, it's a very powerful force. Now you may not recognize it if you're not in social media in the in crowds of social media following the right people, but there's a major impact. There's a major impact. I say since maybe the voter die movement has been a major impact. It's just who are we voting for until we get the right people in position, until we get knowledgeable people in position, then you're going to continue to vote for the same people that's willing to run. But until you teach people about politics enough so they understand what they're doing when they get in those positions, now we're in a situation where we can put people in position. Obama was put in position. Now, he may have been elected or selected to be in the seat, but there is a way for us to rally together using online resources to get people in a position if they're willing to take that step.
um, Mr. Scott is joining us. I don't know very much about his palatial estate up there in Minnesota. I've heard it quite a bit about it, but how are you doing, Mr. Scott?
Very, very good, sir. Getting cold now. Palatial estate is, kind of heated up a little bit. So things going good. Good. Thanks for having me.
Well, it is the 1st of November, and it even gets a little chilly out here in California. So, Minnesota, I have no reason to visit you in November or December.
Yeah, chili in California is not like chili in Minnesota. Trust me.
And, hey, I'm from Pittsburgh, and chili in Pittsburgh is not like chili from Minnesota. So we, but Mr. Scott, we were we were exploring actually the what is black conservatism, and what does it mean to be a black conservative?
Well, you could certainly ask, one of your great cohorts with another show on Saturday mornings.
Well,
I,
I
don't
did
know.
invite him in. I did invite him in.
I don't know, Dan. I mean, James, these parties, this two-party thing, it's really not working. And conservative is really, to me, it's just a veiled word for keeping people of color down. I mean, you just have to look at the party. How many black people are in their party? You look at the Senate. What is it, Tim? And I hate to say his last name, but Tim Scott. He's, yeah, I think he's the only black Republican in the Senate. I mean, so you could say to me, it just seems like it's a party that really, well, I guess as Mr. Tucker would say, the talented tenth or the petty bourgeoisie or that think they're above. And because look at the Democratic Party, look at the number of black people, African American people aligned with the Democratic Party when you look at the Republican Party. So a lot of it seems to be along racial lines to me.
But now, speaking of being close to generational here, because um, when we speak of conservatism and we speak of black conservatism in particular, our word back in the old days, and I'm going to use Mr. Tucker's euphemism, Uncle Tom's. They were, they would have been
Yeah,
for this is my show. They've been house niggas.
yeah,
I mean, so
yeah.
you know, but as Dr. Casey was saying, it seems like there has been a swing um, as far as the younger generation, and they have embraced politics much different than we have, than our generations have, mainly because of social media. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree. I mean, social media, boy, yeah, it's not like when I was growing up, James, as far as the Republican piece just was not a part of my upbringing. Republican just wasn't really, and maybe I missed that memo or something, or my family did, but it wasn't. It wasn't part of anything that we were a part of. And everyone that seemed to be about, coming up, breaking up this racism, this Jim Crow, because my parents came from the South. I mean, they lived through the era, where you go to the drinking fountain, whites only, where you go to the movie, you got to sit upstairs. It's nasty up there. You can't use the bathroom at the movie because it's nasty. I mean, they lived through. I mean, in Birmingham, where my mother was born and raised, she lived through everything you think of, with the Bull Connor, with all the things going on in the South, and so Republican just seemed like it was the enemy of us, and that's kind of how I looked at it coming up. When you had so much overt racism, and we get so confused by this because, see, George Wallace and these guys, these were Democrats. They're the Southern Dixiecrats whose modus operandi was to keep the South as it was, so that blacks were subservient, that blacks couldn't get up when you get on the bus, and all this foolishness that they had in the South that I would hear them tell me about or read about and see it coming up. Conservatism. But like I say, those people were the Southern Democrats, where it was a matter of what they were voting for is to get their states to do what they wanted to do. See, they keep saying it's a states' rights thing because they thought in the South they still had their way of life. That's why so many got out of there. That's why so many, my grandmother took my mom as soon as she graduated from Parker High School in Birmingham. They headed north with the rest of their family and a lot of their friends. A lot of people up here from Talladega and Birmingham that I knew growing up that aren't even relatives. So so the conservative thing, I just has always seen it as a barrier to progress, a barrier to, well, basically what we've been fighting for all along is freedom. That's basically what it has. That's what the whole fight has been, to do what we want to do, how we want to do it, live where we want to go where we can afford to go. And that's,
But Mr. Scott, as Dr. Casey pointed out, and as I'm looking and seeing what Biden has done, I understand the democratic process. I understand Senate, how you make a bill and all this good stuff here. But when I watch the things that the previous administration had done, and by that I'm talking, executive orders, different things that they were doing in order for them to uh, do whatever was necessary to get their particular stuff through uh, legislation, or if they couldn't do it one way, they would do it another. Um, what I'm saying is, it seems to me that since the Democrats have been in office, they have done very little. They've played. We want to get along, and that I mean, I think it's past the times to sing "Kumbaya" and employ the same tactics that the Republicans have used for the last 4 years. Why are we all of a sudden being so soft and wanting to be so politically correct in order to just get the simple things done? For instance, like the John Lewis Voting Act. I thought we had taken care of that back in 1968. I didn't know I still had to fight the vote.
no, I would agree. I would agree. That's what this current tenor of Republican and again, the word conservative is. This is what they're trying to bring back. All of these things that of course we've had the right to vote. I mean, what are you talking about? We fought for this. People have bled for this and died for this, so that we have the right to vote. And all of a sudden now they're saying, "Oh, well, you got to have this again. You've got to go through so and so to vote," and then they rig and sham things like the early votes. So if you don't do this at a certain time, or if you don't come in at this, things that they really don't tell you, so that they can begin to control the vote. And I think that that's, I mean, they think it's a veiled effort, but I mean, I think a lot of us can see right through it. Like you say, we've already fought for these things. These things are already on the books, but they don't. Modus operandi is that don't follow what's already on the books. It's already there, but they make you still fight for it again when you've already done that. So
Uh, let me get Miss Sims in here.
Greetings.
Hello, Miss Sims. How are you doing this evening?
Pretty well. President accounted for.
We were just talking about our present system, and I was trying to see if we could get a mutual definition of black conservatism. What is black conservatism to you?
Hmm. Well, first I go back to the bottom line or bottom line type thinker. And I realize, and I say to people, all politics worldwide contain three things: strategy, power, and control. A strategy is developed to retain or get in power to control others and other things. So, no matter what, you're a black conservative or purple people eater conservative, that uh, candidates running for office, you need to pay attention to what they say and then what they do. Um, if you listen carefully to politicians, and right now there's the mayoral forum on one of the TV stations here. If you listen carefully to what politicians say and do, they'll tell you a lot about them. Now, back in my day, in our era, one of the strategies that black folk wanted to use to get into power positions, or they thought the Republicans were more powerful for the Democrats. They ran as Republicans, thinking that this would help advance them to, number one, get elected, and then in being elected, they saw themselves as being a part of the power group. But some of the things that happened, that if they did get elected, because you got to remember, the white Republicans saw blacks that wanted to run as a Republican, they saw them as an asset to them and their agenda and strategy. So even nowadays, you have to listen carefully to what these black conservatives are saying and watch what they're doing. And it'll vary across the board.
Dr. Casey, how has your generation attacked that?
You know, in our generation at this point, I see more people interested in beginning a new party than going along with what the status quo is, because again, like I said earlier, once you start playing politics, it's hard not to get your feet muddy in muddy water. Once you start stepping in the mud, then it's hard not to get caught up in what politics is on um the forefront, not what people see politics as. But when you get into politics, it's like being in the military. People see the military as one way, but when you actually join the military, you see the military for what it is, and the workings of it. So when you start talking about the workings of something versus what the appearance of it looks like, you're talking about two totally different things. So for our generation, it's like, okay, what are we going to do to change it? But my point that I always make on my show, on Speaking Freedom TV, is that it's hard to make a lot of changes when you have unlimited terms for congressmen and people that's in Senate. We have to change the laws that allows them to be 80 years old and still in a seat for 60 years, because nothing will change if you got the same people that's voting that's been there since it was the way we don't want it to be no more.
I would agree with that. I would agree that, I mean, you look at the TV now with Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and all these people, they, as I look at them, they just seem so out of touch with the real world, so out of touch with what is really going on in the real world. What do our people really need? And it's the same thing as it's been. You know, people need better housing, they need education, they need money, they need opportunity. And this is what seems to continue to be held back. It's always, I don't know why, when I observe the past and I think about, you know, my parents and people coming up, that, well, why was my grandmother a domestic? I mean, why was that her role? Why was that the only job? You know, it was because that's the only job you could get. It's because that was a way that you could do something for your family. So I'm saying, well, why weren't white folks domestics? Why didn't I see white people saying that they worked on the railroad? I had a lot of friends that came up, they worked on, their dads and uncles worked on the railroad. They ran on what they said, ran on the road. And I'm like, well, why don't whites do that? And I'm thinking, I try to balance these things. And the thing is, because they didn't have to do it. They didn't have to do those kind of jobs too, because they own the railroads. They own the houses that had to be cleaned. So, and that just seems like that's continues to be the mantra of this particular country. It really does. It just seems like that's the mantra. And I think Republican, the word is a veiled thing for conservative, which, as the great 45, your friend 45s, make America
now here you go,
make America great again. Make America great again.
I said one time that I appreciated the fact that he allowed some stuff to be exposed. That I don't think if Hillary would have got in office, the racism that was able to be shown in the forefront, that would have never, because all of these people are used to playing politics. You're talking about old racist people that's trying to act like they not racist no more. At like just overnight, voila, you got all these people that's been against black people all these years and all these speeches and all this other stuff, that they always been this way, and now all of a sudden they accepting and they embracing black people. Yeah, Joe Biden, you gonna be good with black people if the only first black president made your ass goddamn vice president. You gon' kind of kiss his ass a little bit. Now you gotta be cool. So now he can play that, if you don't vote for Joe, you ain't black, and then he not doing nothing for black people.
Miss Sims, you want to?
Yes. And dovetailing onto what the young lady said before her last statement, and it's related to, once politicians are elected and go to Washington, where the big boys are, and you can get caught up into what's going on. You gotta, once you get in the game, you gotta know what the game is. You gotta know who the players are and how they play the game. And then you have to, once you think about all that, then you have to think of how you're going to play the game. And a lot of people, even right now, as I've been watching, are, once they get into Washington and in the setting, they leave Minnesota with everything good in mind. Once they get there, like I said, with the big boys, you got to know who the players are, how they play the game, and determine how you're going to play the game. But once you get caught up into all that mixture of stuff, you can lose what you said you were going to do to the Minnesotans. Get in there and get caught up into your self-interest and what you need to do to play the game, to be a power player among that select group in Congress there. And like right now, to me, I was just thinking the other day, it seems like it's a closed group, and it's seems to be the actions and mentality of country club attitude, an exclusive country club attitude, and we don't get to participate back and forth. We get to watch and wait and see when they
Mm-hmm.
open the door what they're going to bring out and tell us or say to us and expect us to buy into it, especially if they need our support to move their agenda along.
That's the good old boys, Miss Sims. That's the classic. That's the visualization of what the good old boys is. It was
Right.
this
And
show that I watched on Netflix. I think it's called The Family or something, and it kind of showed the patterns of or the process of getting into politics and that whole stratosphere. And it was very interesting. There was a lot of subliminal stuff that's in there, but like you said, once they get in there and they start playing the game, they
mhm,
get caught up in the game of politics and everything that they wanted to do if they don't have a strong mind. But even if you got
right.
a strong mind, sometimes you gotta
I agree.
they're going to tell you gotta lay down your will for the bigger picture so that you can get in the position. But by the time you get in position, you didn't forget your real roots.
Well, it's
Right.
like you're saying, like I was saying in the Senate. I mean, in this United States Senate, how many black senators? How
It's
many,
not
how many-
many.
It's one.
One. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
one.
and like I say, I hate to say his name is Scott, but he's the one.
Is
So,
it kidding you?
no, young lady, he's no kidding. He's no kidding.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Warnock just got in from Georgia.
Oh, well, then you're two. You're two
But no,
percent.
but
And
what
so
what
I'm saying, where is the power? Where is the power within that type of structure? First of all, your survival, and then what can you do for the rest of rest of our people? Look at, I mean, on the Supreme Court, it's Clarence Thomas. He doesn't even open his mouth. He doesn't even
they
say
can't.
anything. He doesn't weigh on anything. He doesn't nothing.
Uh,
Whereas
as,
when you came out,
as a
think,
matter of fact, Clarence Thomas, I believe, wrote an opinion concerning if it wasn't the Texas abortion, uh, concerning what's the one they have in front of them now? The Texas abortion law,
yeah,
and
yeah.
also uh, but Clarence Thomas has not I mean he has not been our friend. Like they say, all skin folk ain't kin folk. Well, that's a
Yeah.
very good
Yeah.
example right
He's
there.
just there. It's like this, the spook was set by the door. I mean, he's basically a puppet to say now that he's going to come out on something that the majority, this is what they want. This is what he thinks they want to hear. So that's what he's going to come out with. I don't, when you go back to the legacy of a Thurgood Marshall and somebody
Mm,
like that who was a fighter who really put the school desegregation, all these things that were important to steer and change, he was right in the middle of that. And so you look at that power is there, but for some reason we're not asserting our power
I think some of it is fear.
in
Fear
any
of the backlash, what will happen if you're too powerful, if you say too much, if you make too much change. Like sometimes you don't have to be physically lynched to be lynched.
yeah.
And they'll lynch your character, they'll lynch your resources, they will do exactly what they did when they came here and took the land from the indigenous people and then enslaved them and made them think that they were all from Africa. Because if you don't know that you from here, if you don't know that you own and possess this land, then you won't never come back to take it back from the people that overtook the land.
Yeah.
It's really a mind game.
Yeah. Speaking of Clarence Thomas, I still believe Anita Hill. So going back to that, and maybe the younger generation doesn't know what that is, but going back to that time when all that was going on, and they were, I think it was a particular white politician that was really supporting Thomas and moving his agenda, moving it forward, et cetera, et cetera. And they got him into a position of the Supreme Court. And then the follow up, when he remained silent on everything that, I mean, literally came out for years and years. And I thought about that. And then I thought, I believe that him remaining silent was one of the things as payback for him, for people getting him into the Congress, that they were going to push and push and whatever was going to take to get him on the Supreme Court. Now the payback, uh, back and forth, was that once he got there, he was to keep his mouth shut and vote the way they wanted him to. That was the only reason for years I could think of why he didn't speak up and just, I don't know how often he even speaks now. Maybe as he's aged, every now and then I'll see him do something or get invited to say something, but not real public thing
Well,
events.
But a lot of times that's how they line the pockets of politicians. You ain't necessarily got to give them money, but if you put the right person in position that's going, do what you want them to do, then it's like I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
It's not the color. It's to get
Mm-mm.
someone that thinks like they think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you think like they think and you have the black skin, oh,
You a
this is
win.
this is a win-win-win thing. And that's, I mean, that's another observation that I have. You don't really see a lot of outspoken people. You don't really see a lot of people really get up there. Like coming up, there were so many people that would get on TV. I mean, from the Black Panthers, from the different organizations that were around the country that would speak out about all this injustice,
oh,
specifically towards
well,
black
well,
people.
wait a minute. Let's think about something here. We have a trial going on right now. The kid written off, I believe. What's his name? The kid that shot the three people. Um,
Yeah,
he his mother brings him from home to another state with a weapon. Okay, and then the judge on the case doesn't allow the people that he shot to be called victims,
Hmm.
but it's all right for them to be called rioters and looters. And these are white people that he shot. Okay,
Oh, the
so
people weren't black.
no, no, these, no, they they just happen to be part of the black movement at the time that it happened. But these were three white people.
I've been out of the loop for a while, but I did kind of catch a little bit of that earlier today in regards to his mother involvement in turning him in or whatever the
No,
circumstances.
no.
And I
His mother actually brought him there with the weapon, and
to kill
after
the people.
and after he shot the people, she picked him back up and took him
Oh,
back home.
I
And,
misunderstood.
and
I thought she turned once she found out who did it. That was her son. She turned him in, kind of thing.
no,
Okay, I
no,
misunderstood. Okay, I
no,
misunderstood. All
no.
right.
Well, I think that the reason why they didn't want to call them victims is because it wasn't like they was just somewhere random out the blue and got shot. Now, I don't agree with it, but I understand why that could be a reason for them not to be called victims versus being called looters or rioters because the mindset is they weren't there just not doing nothing, moseying on by. It wasn't. That's the mindset. Now, again, I don't agree with it
Yeah, I
because
mean,
they
but
definitely are victims. They got shot and killed by somebody random. He's not the person that can say whether or not those were the people that were looting or doing anything crazy. But the mindset behind what the judge is saying, it makes sense in legal sense.
So George Floyd was not a victim in
Nobody said that he couldn't be called a victim.
in the legal sense.
Who said he couldn't be called a victim?
No, I'm asking if these people can't be called victims.
That he the reason why is because the difference between those two situations is George Floyd and every other person, it was not during a riot. Now again, I am not saying that them not being able to be called victims is right, but the logic behind it is that it was a riot going on. And I don't know if a lot of us know this, but a lot of the laws allows for white people to go and do crazy shit like what he did. Like the laws were set in place to where you could go and police stuff like that yourself and would not go to jail for it. The fact that he's even in jail for it right now is a miracle, or that even got arrested for it, because in certain places, in certain states, really even federal law allows for certain stuff like that to happen. Now, the reason why again that they're saying that they're not victims is because it's not like they came, he just shot them on the side of the road and nothing else was going on. His a part of his defense, I'm sure, is that he was trying to protect the whatever was going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's part of his defense is that it was self defense as a matter of fact because supposedly the kid pulled the skateboard on him. So you know.
I do know, like Dr. Casey, is that your name? It's correct in that once you get into the legal judicial system environment itself, it is different from outside the legal system and what goes on. And I think a lot of people don't realize that once you enter that arena, that legal arena, that the rules and change, and they're not what we expect them to be. And so as the public is watching things unfold, and they expect certain things based on us watching what's going on, we get people get emotionally hung up in regards to not understanding or not liking what's going on. But here again, once you enter that arena, that legal arena, like the young lady's saying, things, the terms, what's allowed, etc., is geared toward that particular environment.
I agree with you there to a certain extent
Well,
because
I agree only because, see, what they try to do is get you to not believe what you just saw.
Yep, that's right. That's
Okay?
right. That's
And
right.
it's just like the brother that got shot down in Georgia. He's jogging. He's out just jogging through the neighborhood, and he stopped and saw this unbuilt house to just look at. What does the house look like as it's
that
getting built? He stopped it, and then he kept jogging. These people hunted him down and murdered him.
that
And you're
that
saying that they thought that he was stealing out of the house, and they thought so they frame this thing so that they get you to believe not what you saw, but what they tell you. No, you didn't see that. This is the way it happened.
Right.
well
And
that that that,
along
that
with
trial
listen, go
that
ahead.
that
Go ahead.
trial actually starts tomorrow. You can watch that trial on out here in California. It's HNN, and you can
Mm.
watch that trial from beginning to end. There's been some crazy motions presented down there also. But speaking from someone on the other side, when you talk about getting caught up in the legal system treats you the same way that you get treated in the streets if you're broke. If you have no money and you have to depend on a public defender, then 9 times out of 10, not only are you going to jail, but you're going to get a longer sentence. I was fortunate enough to put a few lawyers' kids through college, so I didn't have to spend a long time in jail. you know. But once again, if you don't have no money, it's the same way. Your behind is out. The green counts.
Well,
You
that
talk
goes
about
back. Yeah,
go ahead, Miss Ann.
that goes back to what Mr. Scott was saying. Once you enter that legal arena and you understand who the players are, the game they're playing, whatever, you realize that the law opposing lawyers are really in a competition to win over the jurors' approval, the yay or nay. They're in a competition to get to see who can get the jury to not believe what they really saw happen. And you're right, Mrs. Scott, because I thought of that exactly the same way that you put it. There is a competition to win the favor of the jury to believe, to make you think you didn't really see what you saw, and if you did see it, then this is the reason it happened.
No, if they saw it, see, you have two types of lawyers. You have a fixer, and then you have one that you go to trial with. The fixer is not about going to trial or not. The fixer is to make sure that you get the least amount of time possible. Now that other guy is the one that whose kids you put through school because he's the one that's got to believe that they didn't see what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So uh, I find the same thing. That when I talk about conservatives, uh, and especially when the what we had out here in California with the governor's recall, and it seemed so easy to say, well, not only is he conservative, but he's black. And he's not talking about turning California into a welfare state, which is where I come back again to. It seems like anytime that we get to the point where, you see, maybe I was a little too old school, but coming up in the 70s, I always had that idea of where you're extending one hand, but you have a knife in my back in the other. So, especially coming home from Vietnam, I had a real lack of trust, and maybe that's what's guided me down through the years, where I haven't been able to take on the responsibility of what's been happening to the black community because I've called myself being observant, you know, and when I should have been actively involved. Like I said, when I look at some of the things that are happening to the education, and it's directly affecting my family. When I see, these voting rights bills, and I'm thinking of my future generations, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren, it makes me want to say that I need a change. But I do not think, especially in this age of social media and instant gratification, Dr. Casey, that we're approaching this the right way. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, everybody's approach is going to be different. There's no one singular way to get the goal accomplished. You have to use strategic means. You a military man. When you was in the army, it was not one way to skin a cat. You had to, you know what I'm saying, mix and match in order to get the result that you want. and unless you're willing to use a lot of different resources, like I always say, um you can't just get politicians in seats. You also do need some type of outside source of resistance, if you will say, in order to do it. So you can't just resistance alone. You have to do resistance and some inner working. So you need people in office as well as people that are rallying around the people that's in office. And then that's how you change the laws, that change the way the courts are run, change the way whether or not, how things are handled. But again, so many things are instead of it being addressed, it's covered up. It's like, swept up under the rug. We won't talk about this like this, or we'll talk about it this way, but not really, we're not going to get too deep into it. And when you do that, you're not really addressing issues. You leave too much on the table that needs change, but change can't come without you addressing and getting down to the nitty gritty of the issues.
Well, change cannot come without casualties if you go back to my thinking as a military man, but that's we're talking. But
I
then,
mean, but then okay, so then when the casualties, like the people in Minnesota, or I'm not sure if that was Minnesota. Don't shoot me, okay? The people, the
not,
people, like the people is getting having these issues in different
both
places.
our guests are from Minnesota, just in case you didn't know.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. If you're speaking
Bring
the
it.
truth,
Bring
if
it.
you're speaking the truth, it's the truth no matter where you
Bring
come
it.
from.
Bring it. What's up?
And and James, even at your age, a mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Right.
So
I
and
mean,
so
but
and
when
so when and as voters, we have some accountability too in that, and I'm using this as an example. And when a politician, I'll say Biden, when he ran for president, stop and think, he's not the savior of us all. He is going to do a job. And when he and other politicians get to say, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, etc., etc., we as voters have to stop to think and realize this one person can't do everything by himself. He has to communicate with the other big boys in the game that's playing the game, etc., etc. So, in doing his job, he's going to get in there and manipulate whatever, and etc., etc. And we as voters, if we're going to support him, whether we said yay or held our nose and voted for him, we are going to be looking for him to realistically know that he has to communicate with other people there, and it may or may not work out as he promised back home. And you don't, if you're politicians, even now, news commentators don't fall into that trap of when they ask you, well, what are you going to do when you get there? And this and that. You know, he can't do all this stuff by himself. Just like here in Minnesota, they're asking mayor candidates in other candidates, what are you going to do this? What are you going to do? And they fall right into the trap. Say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I know very well that they have, I think our council's 9 to 13 people, that they can't do one thing by themselves because the other members are going to have to vote. No, number one, he's going to have to try to convince them to think along the lines he is. And then in the end, they're going to vote on it.
but see, now that would be all right if we elected different people every time. But we had these same people that have been in office since I've been a child.
but nobody else is running. So if you don't get nobody to run in those places, then who else is going to take the seat?
Okay, then
The
then
people
then
get
we
it
should.
that have the money. The people get it that have the money behind them. I mean, that's what I want to really look at.
Most
One of these
politicians don't
days.
have. It's not about money. I think a family of politicians. If your daddy was a politician and you feel like you got to be a politician, and then whoever supported your daddy is going to support you,
That's,
but just because of the name.
but I would really like to look at, and I'm going to try to do that this time in these elections. How do young people vote? I mean, they're allowed to vote at 18. I wonder what that demographic, 18 to 25. I see that these young kids now, they just seem to be lost. I mean, here in Minneapolis, the school, one of my sons is a teacher. He says it's ridiculous. These kids, they don't even show up to school. He said he teaches a work program for the seniors, and 3 or 4 of these guys could be graduated if they want. They're 20 years old, fooling around with high school. I mean, so this younger generation, I mean, right here we have carjackings that have gone to astronomical levels in this city, things that we've never had here in Minneapolis. And so, what are the young people striving to do? What is going on with the schools, the young people? Because they seem to be here, and I think it's really around the country, they seem to be really out of control. There's a culture, and I call it, even because I'm not into the hip hop and all that, kind of wearing my pants down, all that foolishness. But that seems to be, they have more pull from their peers in the streets than they do their parents. That
Well,
their parents don't have the pull that what the streets and what the peer pressure is for them to act a certain way. And I don't see, I mean, I see too many kids that are teenagers and that are grown that can't read, that can't speak properly, that can't. I mean, it's like
I
it,
mean that's subjective. When like, okay,
it is. It's anecdotal. I agree, but it's certainly when you see the images on TV, you see the images that you see. I mean, it just
but that's
continues to
only
be reinforced.
that doesn't make up a large majority. You can't. I wouldn't want you to judge all young adults based on the people there where you are. There are variations of people, and it's really going to be based on what you're exposed to. If you're not exposed to anything that's worthwhile to expand your mind by your parents or by your immediate environment, then it's very rare that you're going to get something outside of the box. You are subjected to whatever is before you. So if only um bad things are before you, or if only your environment, your if your schools are not teaching you the things to really help expand your mind, which we all know that 95% of schools, this is not a real statistic, this is just me saying it, 95% of schools don't even have accurate information that they're teaching. It's not accurate history, is not accurate, like the real meat of growth that they need. And if you don't have that, then you're not going to expand your mind. Your mind is only going to be what you expose it to. If you don't expose it to anything, then you don't have anything to go off of. It's like when you never leave out of your city, you think that the whole world is right there in your surroundings. And if you ever get a chance to go, like with the first time you go out of town, you get exposed to something new. But if you never leave out of town, and you be thinking that that environment is it. And then when you talk about like language or how a person talk, the mannerisms, a lot of that stuff is conditioning, in my opinion. We were made to do certain things so we could fit into the American dream of white culture. But like where we come from, um history wise, our ancestors, is not the European culture of what we've been led to believe that it's supposed to be.
You see, I used to want to believe, like you, that this was a minority thing, and these kids were in the minority.
No,
But
white people like this too.
no, no, no. Hey, any white people, Asian people, uh, Puerto Rico, anywhere you find a disadvantaged neighborhood. So I'm not talking about just black people. I'm talking about all poor people. I'll put it like that. So, uh, but okay, I came from Ohio. Most of my family right now still lives either on or close to Martin Luther King Boulevard. Okay, Three of the high schools in that particular district have been closed down. There's only one now. There's no vocational program at that one. I have another nephew in Florida, Jacksonville. Same problem with the school district. My nephew's 14. He talks like a 4-year old. He probably reads on a fifth grade level. I have another cousin that lives in Boston, and they have the same problem in Roxbury. I come out here to San Diego, I hear the same things about the schools out here. These are the same things that we've been hearing about the schools and the education of black people for the last 50 years. I became a chef on a program that was meant for minorities when I came out of prison. A lot of these kids don't have those opportunities anymore. So where does that responsibility begin? Just like with our government, do we have to start with our local politicians before we start worrying about the people that we send to Washington, or do we have to exchange either or? Why can't we have both?
Most
Well,
times the local politicians start locally and then go into the federal government.
I think all of what you all are saying has some validity to it. Um, Mr. Scott was talking about in terms of the youth nowadays and what they're thinking. I think some of that is due to Mr. King's and I generation, that 60s, not passing, some of us not passing some of our knowledge of what we learned and gained, not passing it down to the younger generation. Just like Mr. Scott was saying, in Minnesota, if you turn 18 years old on your birthday or near vote, if your birthday is even one day before the election day, you turn 18, you can vote. I don't think a lot of people, even teenagers, realize that. And even a lot of politicians that are run. One of the things that I was looking at the literature that they passed out, it didn't say that. It didn't say that if you can't read or write properly, you can take somebody with you to the polls to help you with the fill out that. It didn't say that even if you're homeless and live under a bridge and you have someone within your ward or whatever, you can take that person with you to the polls to validate where you say you are. And so I think a lot of the politicians, those things in terms of who can vote, and in Minnesota, they've lined up a lot of things that will enable you to vote. But the politicians, I would say they don't even know a lot of this stuff. But I think when they've come into our doors and passing out their literature, and they'll even come to take you to the polls, especially with the literature, they should have. If I was running, I would have all these little details of who can vote. If you go to the polls in a car and you're not able to go inside, you can have some of the poll judges come out to your car
They
with
don't
your
want you to
ballot
know that, Miss
and
Sims.
and help you to vote. I mean, if you things like that, that's what I mean. Passing down that kind of knowledge to the other generations, and it is subjective in terms of what you're around, what you observe, and things like that. Like our generation, what is it? Discovered individualism. Do what you want to do. I can't tell you who to sock it to. Marriage. Who wants to? You don't have to be marriage. Marriage is this a document, and go brawlers. And I thought about those things. Number one, in terms of marriage is just a piece of paper. And I can remember Cher on the talk show was a joke. She was saying, "Well, look, marriage is just an institution. What do who wants to live in an institution?" And everybody laughed. But I got to thinking, back then especially, all the laws and rules and et cetera, were geared toward being married at that time. So you had to think about what you're doing and what you chose, which path you chose to go on. And it did matter. Your vote did count. That's that I remember saying back then, why vote? Your vote doesn't count anyway. And things like that worked on my mind. Yes, your vote does count. In fact, your local vote counts even more on some level than voting for the president because your local vote is closer to your pocket. If you drop dead right now out in the road, somewhere along the line, some politician has given the approval for that road to be built. When you're buried, some politician along the way has voted on the codes for that cemetery, a plot to be built to be there, et cetera, et cetera. So people don't think about things like that. And I think our generation, I'm going to blame you and I, Mr. King, and some of us didn't pass some of that stuff down. And I'm starting realizing that as I've aged and kind of looking back, and as a circle of life, like I'm 72 years old, and I have to speak from my experiences as being a 20 plus year. One of the things that I did for 20 plus years was a faith-based community organizer. And so some of the things that I've experienced and think about only kind of people that have worked in that kind of arena kind of think that way, whereas James and other people sometimes don't remember that mine is a terrible thing to waste. You got to get back on track.
Well, see now, it's funny you say that because one of the things that really it bothers me, and there's no way that I can actually get away from it, and I have to use it to my advantage. When I walk through the projects, whether it's in Cleveland, where all my family lives, like I say, Martin Luther King Boulevard, or even out here, uh, I get respect as an OG. I don't get the respect for the things that I've accomplished since 1985. You know, and but at least as an OG, I can get that kid to come and speak to me. I
Mm-hmm.
can get him to come and talk to me. I can get him to put his gun down for a minute and say, "Hey, man, come over here. Let's sit down and have a talk." Maybe we share a blunt, whatever it takes. You know, but I'm using my knowledge and trying to help him in a positive way. Whereas if I come to him telling him how wrong he is,
Mm-hmm.
or coming to him from what he considers sideways, then I've lost that kid forever. There's nothing I can do the next time he sees me. This is truly a case of first impression when you're talking about the streets.
And I think um, you've always impressed me as a caring person who cares about what's going on with other people. And in out in the streets, I think one of the ways in dealing with that person and you communicating with him is is how you communicate with him and the relationship that you build with that person, and somehow discuss with that person that there's other sides to you that they may not be aware of. But how you do that is kind of crucial in terms of not turning this person off. It's kind of like building that relationship, how you communicate with him, letting him know that there are other sides to you and there'll be other sides to them as they develop and grow that are positive, that'll get them to other places where they want to be. And I said all that to say I can relate to what you're speaking of and how you're speaking of, but it's not impossible to do.
Mr. Scott, you've been kind of quiet over there.
Well, James, I have to reflect on kind of what you said earlier. As we're talking about schools and these opportunities for education in our cities. And this is happening, it seems like you were saying, in every city. I mean, the example right here in South Minneapolis, when I was a little kid, right down the street, there was a grade school called Warrington. Right next to it, I mean, a few steps away was the junior high school called Bryant. And then 4 or 5 blocks away from that was the Central High School, the high school, Central High School. And it was a whole thing where these kids could walk to these right in your community. They've closed all three of those are closed. And they closed them one at a time. First they closed the grade school, then they closed the junior high, and then they closed the Central High School. And then they closed 3 or 4 other high schools in the city of Minneapolis. And so it's just the opportunities now. So these kids can do well if they're given an opportunity. If they're given things, when we're coming up. Me, it was church every Sunday. It was Sunday school. I didn't really, but I had to do it. So it gave me some discipline to know that, I had to do this. I did this. And I had made a lot of friends. I knew the community. I saw a value in it over and above, and including the message that was there. But I don't think kids have any parental type of real structure in their life where they're kind of taking care of everything that they do, the parents know about. I think now, when kids have to get on a city bus to go to school and say, oh, maybe I'll just take the bus over here today and not go. There's not a bus driver that's taking you exactly where you're going. And when you get done, they're taking your butt home. So we have really, and we can't count on these politicians. I mean, because that's just become something that is thrown at us. And I really wonder where these kids, do they vote? Do they understand that these things are important to them? And I wonder, does the family talk about these things? Do they? I guess I'm kind of our generation. I'm just kind of just disappointed in it. And I think that's what the young lady said earlier. I just, all the people I knew in the neighborhood, they had jobs. All the people I knew, they worked. Most of the people I went to school with, just in the neighborhood. Some kids get in trouble. That happens. Some kids, they find their way a little bit later. But there wasn't all this shooting, jacking, all this violence, all this thing where people don't really have a real, they don't seem to really have a real love of life or respect how precious it is to be alive. When I did child protection, I'd see these young mothers and young families with 3, 4 beautiful little kids, and I'm like, gosh. And I would just think of my boys, how I wanted to be with them. My boys played basketball. I would have went to all the practices if I didn't have to work. But we have, and those things are going to happen. Those things are going to happen. But to me, it just seems that there's an explosion of these things. And maybe this is in observation. I'm sure that, the kids have opportunities, but I don't really see the emphasis. I don't really see the emphasis on training, the emphasis on putting programs together. I mean, the STEM programs, all these new technology things that are coming up, they're going to need these kids to work with. They need to know these things.
Yeah. I think two things play into what you're saying, Mr. Scott. We as a society somehow gotten to the point of not seeing our children as assets in the cycle, in how they play in the cycle, in the cycle of life.
Yeah.
How that there's a balance in the cycle of life when you're young, and then as you age, and as an asset. One of the examples as an asset is that I mean that as I've aged, if I haven't taught my child, seen that my child knows how to read and function in this world, how can that child help me as I age and maybe get dementia? That child will, if he can't read, how can he advocate to me for my medical needs and things like that? So that's a balance. And then number two, I have gotten to the point of actually hating when people say youth are our future. No, youth are right now. They need to be dealt with right now because in people's minds, when they say youth are our future, then in their mind, the future is way, way far off.
Right,
The
right.
future can be the next second. So youth are here and now and into the future. So you start dealing with and valuing your youth right now and getting them uh, more to be an asset. And I don't know how we as a society somehow let the school systems do away with the vocational courses and things like that. And I can remember when my children were in high school, they're now 40, 47, and 43, that those courses were still in school, but it was getting to the point. Everybody's got to go to college, go to college, go to college. The push was that. Well, you stop to think about it. If you go to college and you become a doctor, whatever, who's going to build your car to get you to work? Who's going to build your house? I mean, you're not going to take off time from being a doctor to go and build your own house. So here again, there is a balance of what is needed for youth. And I think when we allow those vocational courses to go away, we threw away millions of kids,
But they
millions
had
of
to
them,
they
and a
had to
lot of
do
them in the
away with
streets.
that in order
Good,
to make college more prevalent. You make college more
Right, right,
prevalent
right,
by
right,
taking away the
Yeah.
things that would help them
right,
to advance
Yeah.
prior to
They
right.
needing to
can,
go
You
to
needed
college.
you
And then
needed
college
both. You
can't
need
even
them
give you the
both. Yeah.
job that you want. If you're not tapped into who you are, then you going to college and
Right.
wasting probably the
yeah.
first $50,000 just to figure out what
Not
you
for
really want to
everybody.
Yep,
do.
yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep,
Not
yep.
for
I agree.
everybody.
You needed them both. You needed them both. But back then, the main thing was stuck out is that our kids weren't getting into college, and we knew that there was value in that also, and so the push was go to college, sure, but there were kids
They
that
played us.
didn't want to go to college, that they had interest, they could fix a car overnight or whatever, and we didn't
They
pay
played
attention
us.
to that.
College prepare you for work, but it don't prepare you to really be independent. They played
I
us.
have
They
to
made us
ask Miss
think we
Sims.
needed college.
I have to ask Miss Sims a question.
Yes.
Are you in favor of defunding the police?
No. There's no such thing that will make it work, and you don't have to defund the police to make the corrections that are due now. And
Well,
you
it's on the
cannot.
ballot. It's on the
Pardon?
ballot up here. It's
I
on the
know. I
ballot.
know that. I know that.
uh,
And I voted for not defunding the police because it's just
It doesn't make sense.
muck and
Not
mire. Muck
totally.
and mire.
uh,
It's create.
uh,
Right now we have thousands of people that are acting independently and dysfunctional. Going that route, we add more thousands of people
But see,
okay,
with
do
wait,
that,
it.
wait, wait,
you can,
hold on.
yeah,
I want to ask something here because it seems
mm,
like everybody except for me is for, well, I'm for defunding the police. And I'll say it like this: it's not so much defunding as it is reforming. Because, as we've mentioned many times on your show, Mr. Scott, we have 200 policemen that are retiring or leaving jobs in Minneapolis or in your city. Now, not one of those 200 men have walked a beat within the last decade. So why can't you take the money that you're paying them, sitting on their asses, to create some type of department that goes out into the community and perhaps just walks around the neighborhood like a goodwill ambassador?
You think
Or,
they scared?
wait,
They scared to patrol. They ain't gonna want to be walking
yeah,
around. They
no,
scared. They're
they
smart
still
about
have
it.
to be,
That's
they
why they
still
killing
have to
people
be
so
police.
fast.
okay,
They still
okay,
have to be police.
wait a minute. Okay, so I have a
Okay.
solution for that. Everybody talks about the pipeline to prison. Okay, so why don't you take those people that are coming out and use those people to help integrate the community into what you need. Because you see, first of all, there's a fallacy that the people out in the street fear the police. If I'm a thug, I don't fear the police. You bring in the police, the only thing that does is make me more combative. If you bring someone there that I can relate to and I can talk to, then maybe we can be a liaison in between the police and the community.
And you can do that by having a police that have those skills and abilities to do that. And I give you a quick
Most
But
police
example.
officers
In
don't.
the
but you
city,
do but the
in the city, give me a
neighborhood does
quick
not
example.
trust the police.
Quick example. Quick example. Just real quick.
Mr.
Quick
Scott,
example.
the neighborhood
In the
does
west
not
side,
trust the police.
just give me a quick example.
Okay, go
Just
ahead.
a few minutes. On the west side of St. Paul, here in the Twin Cities, okay, it's always been a Hispanic Mexican enclave. Okay, always. You go there, you get the best Mexican food anywhere around here in Minnesota. They have a policeman on the St. Paul Police Force he's assigned to that community. He grew up in that community. He knows all the people, all the thugs, everybody in the community, and he's there to to police that community, not in a policing knock you in the head way, but he's there, and they trust him. They grew up with him, and I think you can find people like that, but I think they still have to have the skills. You start sending social workers in, they don't know what they're getting into. All of a sudden, these social workers go into your house. Oh, you don't have any food in your cupboard. Oh, what? Where? Your icebox is empty. You're neglecting these kids. What
Yeah, but
about
instead of
going?
helping, they immediately try to take them away and try to make
They,
them villains
thank
instead of
you,
helping.
thank you.
Right.
Then all of
That,
a
that,
sudden, oh, we got to move these kids. We got to disrupt your family because you're not. So that's not the answer to this to
that,
me. And
that,
I was a
that,
child protection supervisor for 25 years,
that's
and
why
I
I'm
did.
saying. That's why I'm saying you take people from within the neighborhood
Yeah.
and you let them handle the problems within the neighborhood. And
Uh-huh.
if it becomes something that needs a policeman, then you escalate it to that point. But if
That
you
seems good, but that's not really
tell tell
realistic.
tell me
It's not
something,
realistic.
tell me
Well, in
something
my
that
scenario,
tell
the
me
guy on the
something
west
that
side
has
is a
worked then.
policeman. He's a
T-
policeman, but he works in the
tell
community.
tell me something that has worked then. I've been waiting since I came home from Vietnam since 1972. Tell me something that works.
You can't say
Uh,
something that works when the only thing that has been in place is the system that we have at hand. When all the laws and everything is already designed to work against the common person, then that system but reforming, changing one thing here or there is not going to help anything. You have to change it from the core. Again, you got to go. There needs to be a group of people, non-politician people, that go and read every single law that has ever been written. That's the only way you get down to changing things for real, is to change the law. If you don't change the law, like the immunity thing, the qualified immunity is not the only immunity problem. Right now, I got a doctor at the VA that they ain't gonna nick my bowel, and he's about to get immunity because guess what? He's a federal
He's a
officer.
federal employee. That's right.
As long as he worked for the government, then they gonna just we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it, and they will never get a knock or a mark on their dang on license or anything else, because as long as they work for the government, they're protected. You could be exactly wrong. All they have to do is not put the right thing in the report or say something wrong or don't add something, and it looks like that they legit. And because they work for the government, they got to be telling the truth. And nobody believes that they lying because they work for the government. Shit, they're those
Yeah.
biggest lies in the world.
I used to hear the one. There was a fire. You know, if you're a veteran, I think. Well, you might not have got that one, but there was a fire in Springfield, Missouri, back in the '60s. And I used to get that one all the time. Your records were burned up. But anyway, uh, so
They will find a way to make their case be what they want it to be.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Miss Sims, I know you are still recuperating. I'm glad to see that you were able to make it tonight. We always enjoy having you, and I enjoy your comments on our Black News every Saturday.
Thank you,
So,
thank you.
why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening, and we hope to get you back during this whole month while we're talking about Black conservatism.
Final thoughts. Any particular subject or just
No,
overall?
ma'am.
Okay.
These are your final thoughts.
Okay. My final. I won't call them my final thoughts. My thoughts at this moment in terms of Minneapolis and our voting. I voted by mail-in ballot, but I didn't get it mailed in before I became ill, and so my daughter took it to um, an early voting place on Sunday and actually mailed it. But I think this is a moment in time for Minneapolis in terms of actually putting some thought into where we're going as a people and as a society, what we what we consider as assets, what we need to be looking at in terms of who we choose to represent us, their behavior and their actions in regards to going forth. And this not only just includes black folk, but it includes all folks, especially as I live on the north side of Minneapolis, and I'm coming from that perspective in regards to moving forward and creating positive things and making concentrating more on. I agree that we can't not concentrate on our youth. We've got to go back and bring them along. And even if it means if they're not at a reading level, etc., 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 I explain to them that uh, how important it is that they do read. Don't allow them to get in the they may already be at a point that they're ashamed of not being able to read. I don't want people to know. But one of the things we need to do is go back and bring people along, our youth and people, even their parents, etc., in regards to pass information on, show them a different, let them know there's a different way of thinking and moving forward. End. The end.
Thank you so much, Miss Sims. You have a great night.
Thank you.
Mrs. Scott, your final thoughts for the evening. I know I'll
Well,
see you Saturday probably.
possibly, yeah, yeah. It's a pleasure to join you folks. And I'm kind of focused on right now here in this movement to defund the police here in Minneapolis, because what that really would mean if this passes on the ballot is they would disband Minneapolis police and they would create something called a public safety department. Now, no one knows exactly what that is. No one knows if they would be armed. If they would. None of that has been thought out at all. So that's why I think that this is extremely, extremely misguided. I'm just going to be watching what this does, because it's a real pivotal time here in the city of Minneapolis. And that and a couple of other things that are thrown into this ballot, along with the possible change of mayor, flipping the city council. So I'm not a fan of throwing the words defund, because what it is it's a scare type of a thing. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Of course, you just need to get rid of people like Derek Chauvin, who should have never been supervising anybody on anybody's police force. And that's what they need to do. Have a chief that can go ahead and get rid of these fools. When they're on probation, they can be gone. They don't have to go through no arbitration. They don't have to go to no union. You're at will as long as you're on probation. And during that probation, you better be the type of person that the city wants on the police force. So we shall see. We shall see.
All right, Mr. Scott. As I said, I'll probably see you Saturday, but great having you on the show. Hope you can
Thank
make it
you.
next week. Dr. Casey, we're going to have to get together here. We got to do a show together. We got to figure out. Well, actually, we do this show together. So, but give us your final thoughts and what direction do you think things are going in? Do you have any final thoughts about black conservatism? Whatever.
So my final thoughts would be first, follow me on Instagram, Speaking Freedom. Um, you can look up my show. I talk about spirituality. I talk about marriage and family issues. I'm a life coach. I'm an ordained minister, and I have written over 7 books. I've published 4 actual audio books and 4 workbooks, as well as my first book is My Time. So my final thoughts is that it's going to take a lot of educating and re-educating ourselves with the reality of history. Whether it first time on the show we was talking about religion, and all of those things play into politics, regardless if we realize it or not. Every aspect that has been put in place up until this point feeds into the controlled narrative of what we are supposed to believe, what we are allowed to believe, and how we are able to protest and fight for what we believe in. Because if
Right.
you listen to the Bible, you look at the Bible, it say obey the land, trust your masters, basically do whatever the hell they tell you to do, and don't murmur or complain too much. It'll be all right because Jesus is gonna come back and save you eventually. And when you look at it like that, it goes back into the Christian denial. So instead of addressing the issues that need to be addressed, it's just being denied and swept under the Jesus rug. So when you play into all of those things and then you put politics in it where the church can't really do too much about talking about politics, and then they getting tax advances and write-offs and all of those things up under the church business of a 501c3. So all of that plays into the bigger picture plan, because if you keep people not thinking about what they need to be thinking about, then they're
Mm.
not going to think about the things that they really need to be focused on. So
Right,
if you
right.
keep them distracted, then it's easier to keep the narrative what it has been and continue it along the way to where what they want it to be. But when people start critically thinking, this is where the internet comes into play. When you start critically thinking and allowing people to collaborate ideals in a place where before you couldn't, you were scared to talk about stuff. Now you can collaborate and come to places like this where you can go online and you can learn some things and really talk about stuff. So when you get that into play where people actually are learning and talking and growing, then that's when you really see change. That's the only way we're going to see change in politics. I mean, aside from all the old people dying out or getting voted out, but if they in the black market, like conspiracy theories would like us to believe, they ain't dying because they got access to everything that they need to continue to live on and live on and live on. So I mean, it's just it's a lot. It is a large plethora and a level of is layers to the issues that go on, and it's no
Mm.
one thing or no one group that's going to make it better. It's going to be a collective. And
Right.
honestly, this is my last thing. I kind of hope that the white people that are racist and mad continue to riot and continue to act the ass, because that is what's gonna change America. They ain't gonna never let black people act like they let these white people act. So when they act up and when they tear stuff up, that's when we gonna say they're gonna be like, oh, it's time, it's time. That's when it's gonna be time. It won't happen until they do it. When they get pissed off, when they tear shit up, then they'll allow us to come in and rescue everybody. That's what we do. We rescue everybody. They fuck shit up, we come in and we make it better.
Kumbaya. Oh, that's a, that's another show.
Kumbaya.
all
Oh
right.
Lord.
All right, y'all.
Kumbaya.
I'll see you next Monday. You have a great night.
Good night. Peace and love to all everybody. Bye bye.
Take care.
Uh, let me see. I think I see Brother Williams here and Brother Karan. Welcome, brothers. How you doing this evening?
Doing all right, Brother
I'm
James.
good, brother.
Uh, I didn't know whether you heard a lot of what we were talking about, but Brother Williams, I did send you a short email telling you what we were talking about, and we were talking about black conservatism,
Right.
uh, which uh, I guess in my age we would call it Uncle Tomism, uh,
Right.
but
The young
maybe.
folks call it cooning right now. They
Oh,
Yeah.
label it cooning.
okay, all right, okay, uh, go ahead, Brother Williams. The floor is yours here.
Well, I want to start off with something Dr. Casey said because I thank you for your insight on how you came at it. Now you referenced something in regards to them basically keeping the people away from learning what they need to learn, so that they basically are dumbed down. I talk oftentimes about how basically when you look at the keeping black people domesticated is what I refer to it as, and keeping us assimilated. You're talking about keeping us at a level of being entertained that's below a sixth grade level. And when I say that, often what I'm referring to is that especially with the way the internet is used nowadays, it is we oversaturated with a whole lot of misinformation, oversaturated with a lot of things that just what was referred to as drama TV or reality TV or just entertainment in general that is based around consumption. And when you keep the people focused on consumption and you keep us focused, particularly black people focused on consumption, then we're not being producers. See, we're constantly engaged in that consumption role. So as it applies to like what we're talking about with the black conservative, the deal is in I don't know if y'all made any reference to like the boule, which I don't can't get a lot into, but you have a class predominantly a class of black people that was geared toward creating a situation where the majority of our people would be locked out of opportunity. Going into the black conservatism, basically, and this is one thing that I thought was real interesting. And I don't know if Dr. Casey, you have more information on this, but W.D. Du Bois was part of the Boule. And W.D. Du Bois was actually hated Marcus Garvey, hated Marcus Garvey because basically the Boule was established to prop up the United States and prop up the way this country was rolling. Whereas Garvey was about separatism, and not separatism for the sake of us just being separate, but it was for the sake of repairing our mentality, repairing our culture, and repairing our way of life so that we could be self-determined people. In other words, worked on reestablishing us to have a power base, and by having a power base, then we'll be in a position of being able to control what happens within our communities and operate from a position of empowerment as a people. Now, keep in mind when you talk about Garvey, he built hotels, he built chains of grocery stores, he organized trucking companies, he built schools, he built restaurants, he organized printing presses, he had 3 newspapers. He did a whole lot of things. He had 5 ships that dealt with trade, back and forth from the continent. He did a lot of things that was leading us toward self-empowerment, had over 6,000 members. But the deal is when the Boule was established, they broke the cycle of what was being developed and created this what we refer to as a gatekeeping opportunity and a gatekeeping perspective to subjugate the masses of our people to a position to where they were locked out. And mind you, the Boule was established through the historical black colleges, through the Greek fraternities and sororities. And so the thing about this is when you create a separation of the wealthy, you just they just massage and exercise the whole thing about the separation of the class struggle. And so the black conservative buys into the idea that, you know, if you just take race out of the picture, and if everybody works hard and everybody, pursues an education and pursues and go against the grain no matter what, then we are are able to overcome our racial I guess our racial issues in regards to that being what oppresses us. And now mind you, that does work for a small percentage of us often, but it is not to the point to where you can expect that situation is what gets us over the hump, because we're dealing with a an environment to where basically everything is being systemically dealing with systemic and systematic racism to the degree that most people are locked out of opportunities, period. As well as you can even go back into the things that people like to consider conspiracy when you talk about how uh, drugs were actually dropped into the black community. You talk about to where policing, going back to what that was discussing earlier, policing is targeted toward our community. Everything is putting us at a disadvantage anyway.
Well,
Society, go ahead, Dr. Casey, and then I jump back in.
I think that it's the sellout mentality.
Hmm.
And I say that in various ways, because you got the sellout mentality of the story of the first black person that was taken to Europe and was taught, learned, or whatever they did with him, and then he brought them back, and then he helped them to take over the country, take over the land, should I say, because the United States is a corporate entity, and then
Right,
America is the land. But then on top of that, it has been converted to a whole white narrative, so to where black people didn't exist. If I didn't have this dictionary back here, this 19 or 1828 dictionary that told me the original American was a copper skin, we would think that nobody was on America until the white people came. And then the
right,
white
right,
people came and they brought everybody here. And so when you give the disadvantage of them not knowing that, look, y'all was here. We just don't want y'all to know that y'all was here, because if y'all know that y'all was here, then y'all could take the land back. But also, you got to also remember that when the British Americans, the European Americans that came here, they came here running from the treatment that they treated black people with. So they came here looking to get the upper hand, to get over, and that's what they did. And then on the other part of the selling out is too often, instead of teaching the next generation, we want to sell everybody everything. I need to sell you how to be a better person. I mean, it's cool to make money, but it's better to make a better world, because if you make a better world, then you won't have to depend on the money in the same way that it has been used as a crutch at this point. So
hmm,
it's a matter of being willing to teach more people and reach more people than you trying to charge more people and get money. Like, a lot of people wouldn't do different type of interviews, wouldn't do different type of things because there's no money attached to it. But if the goal is to help the generation or help the world to grow and heal the world or whatever the case may be, then at some point we have to feed people the information, regardless if they pay for it or not. And that's where we get a
hmm.
lot of our hang up and our catch up at.
But that goes back into what I was saying about how the entertainment industry, and the idea is to pacify people to not seek higher levels of education from the standpoint of just so that we can be able to function at a more critical thinking level. See, we get sedated to the point to where most of us only associate education with what? Economics. We don't associate our education with learning who we are, learning about ourselves, and advancing ourselves, and being in a position of being of empowering and being producers. We tie education directly to simple economics, and by doing so, that's how you form that group of gatekeepers that operate from a position that don't want the majority of the people to operate on that same level, because capitalism can't survive in a condition to where everybody is equal. It just can't.
I face a lot of backlash because all of my information is free. Right now, I struggle. My biggest struggle is that people think that I should charge for everything that I know. And I'm thinking, like, well, God, I didn't pay for my education. I went and got a degree, got my loans. And because I'm a disabled veteran, all my loans was wiped away. So, how do I look like getting all my loans wiped away? And I ain't got to pay a damn in my loans back. And then I want to charge everybody. And a lot of times the reason why people are so high is because they got so many loans,
Yep.
not just student loans, because nowadays people are funding their businesses with loans. So they gotta pay, they gotta charge you an arm and a leg in order to even pay back their business loans so that their business won't be repossessed, basically.
Yeah. And remember, in the street code says the pimp and the pusher says the game is to be sold, not to be told. So you breaking the code.
I mean, somebody, I follow somebody, and they said it should be the game is to be taught, not to be bought, and I like that a little bit better
Hmm.
than the game to be sold, not to be told.
Right.
Um, and, and,
That's the point. That's the point.
and I guess in its place, it could be good if you're selling, you know what I'm saying? Like if you teaching finesse, if you teaching, you know what I'm saying, like really running game. But when you teaching like life skills, when you get something that can really help a person grow at the core of their being, that
Hmm.
needs to be, you know what I'm saying? Like, but I don't believe in prostituting my gift. I call it gift
There you go.
prostitution. And
There
and,
you
and
go.
a lot of people look at me crazy. I've crazy. They think that I'm crazy because I would rather give it away and help people grow than to charge people for everything that I know.
Right. Like I said, you're not bending to the way that is the society is established and set up. It is meant for. That's how you keep that separation and that gatekeeping going.
Hmm.
Is you tuck everything away and you keep it from the next person.
But Dr. Casey, I still want you to kind of address what I think is a problem in our community, and that's the undereducation of our community. We take uh, I- it seems to be, now, like we give trophies for participation. you know it's, oh,
No, that ain't seem like they do that for real in school. Everybody, all them
right.
damn kids get a participation trophy. Y'all ain't did shit. Y'all barely learning. Y'all getting participation trophy. Earn something.
So
I'm
how
sorry.
do like, uh, like I said, my particular situation, I'm starting, like with something that's interesting to that particular person, and because it's coming from me, and because it's coming from that past reputation, it's accepted. But how do we instill the importance of education within our community? Because if it's anyone that needs to be educated and learn how to take our skills and use them to our advantage, it's our particular community. And it's not me, because I'm on this end. I'm trying to keep you off from shipping me out to sea, with a canoe. I'm just I got one foot on the banana peel, but I want to make sure that next generation at least has the tools. If I give you, like, like what's the old saying? If I teach you how to fish rather than give you a fish. So how do we get back to that concept within our community?
You gotta have people that's willing to take the initiative. You gotta have adults that's willing to say something. But nowadays, you can't even say nothing to nobody because if you say something to somebody, kids, you're gonna get cussed out. They're gonna try to then gonna attack you. So it's a disadvantage to even. It seems like a more of a disadvantage to try to speak up, to try to be present because you ain't their daddy, you ain't this, you ain't that, you can't say nothing. So it's going to take for one parents to understand the village mindset of a community. But
Hey,
then, in order for there to be an understanding of the village mindset, there has to be trust gained again within the village, because there's so many snakes, crooks, molesters, and everything else that's underlying in the village, to where now there is a reservation to allow somebody to come and tell your child something, because are they going to use this opportunity to take advantage later? Are they going to use this ability or this closeness to take advantage? So that becomes a fear for a lot of people. You got to think about all the amount of women and men who came up molested by a family member or by somebody. Now you got trust issues. Trust issues don't start with relationships. It start when you a child and you trust somebody to do something, and they violate that trust. They steal your innocence. They rob you of something, and then that creates the barrier to where now I remember what somebody did to me when I was little, so now nobody can say nothing to my child, or nobody can do this. So it's a matter of um healing trauma, getting to know ourselves more, understanding the things that were taken away from our ancestors when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to just the community. A lot of stuff was robbed from us. It was made to where now I'm a I'm gonna take you and put you over here in this area. So now you're gonna be against the people that's over there. It's like the house nigga, field nigga thing, but just in a different it's just a different face of it. It's almost like people think that when you look at the president or the Congress, it's like being and having a corporation. The president is the CEO, the face of the company, and then the Congress and the Senate are the board members. And people don't see it as that. They see it as this is some way different than how this works, and that's not the case. It's just a different face on the same system. It's the same system. You're just changing the face of it, changing what it appears to be.
let me say this real quick, and then let's hear from Brother Quran. I do want to say one of the things in regard to that trauma that a lot of people don't address and look at is that that was also part of the plantation buck breaking.
Hmm.
If you remember buck breaking, the idea is you take the strongest black man and they would molest him in front of his family, in front of the rest of the slaves,
See, but that
and
that
break him down.
that trickle over into not just molesting the strongest man, it's molesting the strongest woman,
Right,
or the
right,
person with the most charisma, whoever seems
correct,
like they're gonna
right,
grow up and be something. Oh, we gotta
right,
take her or take
right.
him, and you know what I'm saying, and they dummy it down. But everything, that's what I'm saying. When you say it's the same slave system again,
Yep,
all of the systems are the same. They're just rebranding. They're
yeah,
rebranding the same thing over and over and over again.
cause
And
it
we don't
works.
see it as rebranding because we thinking that it's change. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's changed. The brand is changing. The core values have not.
correct. And also I would say too in regards to what we're getting on is that we have to find a way to where what stimulates us toward education, um, is basically our appetite. Think about this. Our appetite is not geared toward learning, not geared toward production, is geared again toward consumption. So if we want to reach the next generation in regards to getting them to see the importance, we have to recognize the fact that we are literally, and I say this all the time, but we are at war. And in the war that we're fighting a war for our people's minds and their ability to recognize that they are on the battlefield and that they are under attack. And the way the attacks are happening goes back to what Dr. Casey is saying. When you rebrand it, you don't recognize it. You call it something different, and then all of a sudden, the most of the people are still referring to it as something that the old name, and so they're by definition, they again not being critical thinkers, you get lost in the fact of that. It's like when I would say to a lot of the Panthers and talk about COINTELPRO, they like, oh, that happened back then in the '60s,
No,
but
that's still
no,
happening right
it's
now.
still happening now.
Witness
But
protection, all that.
right,
But see, we talked about this, James, one day, not that long ago, when I brought up Jesse and Al and all of them and all that. That, you know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people don't like to hear the truth though.
Yeah.
But those is the same people that you know what I'm saying, they running information. They, you know what I'm saying, secret informants on
Yep.
the low, but they gotta play it straight though, because they trying to stay out of trouble. But that goes back to even what we was talking earlier. As long as you can pull the wool over somebody's eye, as
Mhm.
long as you can make it look like what it needs to be, then they're gonna do whatever they want to do. And it's limited on education. When it comes to education, how are we gonna get people to want to be educated when everything is entertainment? Like, the
Right.
only way to get education in there is to make it entertaining. So even like, I do a lot of my shows are based on situational stuff that I hear online. I don't like the life coach based on what I think people need. I want to hear what you got going on, and I'm gonna tell you based on what you actually got going on. And when doing that though, it ends up being entertaining because I have to talk about things that's going on in the media. But a lot of times I end up talking about things that have to do with myself. And a lot of people are not willing to share their trauma, their dirt,
Hmm.
what they got going on. It's so hush hush, or somebody's going to use it. But I always feel like if I talk about it, can't nobody bring it up to me and try to
Right.
use it
Right.
over me,
Right.
because I've already brought it up.
Yeah.
And a
You
lot
took
of
the
people
power
are
out of it.
not willing to
Yeah.
do that.
But see, that's psychology. That's also understanding psychology and what we call dark psychology and psychological warfare. So our people need to be aware again that we are at war. Brother Quran, what you want to drop on some of this?
Um, I believe it comes down to the depth of the individual mentality or the plight of individualism we have in the community. And I thought you were gonna talk about owning the lake when he gave the analogy of
Yeah, yeah. I say that for you. Go
teaching.
ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So you can teach a person how to fish, but we're not focused on owning the lake that you're fishing from. And so
Hmm.
in that sense, we need to get on board and get back to knowledge of true self. Once you start breaking down knowledge of true self and let the youth know, or just let people know in general, that you're in a sheeple state right now. And so just human psychology alone, we're working against the monkey see monkey do
Hmm.
process that's just natural in human beings. And so when your masters are the system, then you're only going to be afforded the opportunities that you're giving out. And so we must break out of the victim mentality, um and start getting what we call it a balanced predator, which is kind of suspect when you first hear it. But the symbol of a panther is a balanced predator, not taking more than what it needs from the community. And so once we get in the mindset that we are not what's happening to us or defined by these things, um then we get into empowerment and an empowerment phase, and that's what we need to get back to, um as a people. And so on the Black conservative, with the shucking and jiving and it's more that plight of individualism, and get mine, you got to get yours mentality. um and I think in anything, there are some points, but when you force yourself into a polarity of us versus them, or red or blue, then by proxy you're going to have to be blind to a certain amount of facts just by affiliation.
Hmm.
Do you have? Is there a fine line between being blind and acceptance of?
Well, I would call a fine line generally has to do with a matter of age and time. For instance, it goes into just like I think we was referencing earlier about how religion plays such a big role in the suppression of our critical thinking. Well, if you take the fact that I'm by the time I'm hitting my 40s, 50s, or even 60s, to realize how much religion played a role and subjugate
At
me
that time, they don't
to
want to even
narrow
admit it because they ashamed, and then they
it.
they they they
And that's
doubting
what
everything that they know. So
right,
by
right.
that time, they just go with
It,
the flow.
it's a point of no return. That's what I'm getting at. So that I'm just using that as extreme example. So the point of no return also applies to how we view most of things that we feel like we've accomplished or gotten good at. So when we've gotten good at something, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, in particularly, especially if we come to find out later on that when we call ourselves to be mastery of something, you can be mastery of foolishness, but if to you it's not foolishness, and somebody comes along and shows you what it really is, going back to calling it what it is, now all of a sudden you basically just pulled the carpet from up under my feet. Most people are not willing to start over. Most people are not willing to accept the fact that how they've been raised by their parents and how they've been raising their children is dead wrong.
We
Our
had this whole
pride takes that
conversation
in.
a couple weeks ago, and they was mad at me. I'm talking about they was mad at
Yeah.
me because I was like, look, the whole everything that we know about religion and the Bible is really hogwash. I mean, because it's none of it is firsthand knowledge. It's all he said, she said from what somebody else said. It's like the telephone game.
Yeah,
They told the story to somebody, that told the story to somebody, that told the story to somebody else, and now we trying to believe the whole story. And a lot of it is not scientifically possible. Just in the Jesus with no sperm, that's like not even like, but people don't want to listen to that. And the fear that has been used to make people to avoid even seeking to know the truth, like everything that our ancestors believed in has been said to be the devil now. Like
yeah.
nothing is light or right unless it's white.
And see,
And or the narrative that they but that's how COVID plays into this because now they're able to see what type of fear mongering they are able to do and how they can control people with fear. Because if I tell
yeah,
you this, watch how they move. Oh, if I
right.
say this, watch how they do this. Oh, if we say this, look, all the gas gone. We can. They running the numbers up on us. They playing us right, like in every way. They went from playing us from taking the vocational stuff out of the school to
Mm-hmm.
making us think that we need to go to college. They played us, and now they playing us every time they make a panic, and everybody run out and buy up everything that people don't even fucking need.
Yeah,
Toilet tissue.
I did we did a show on the weaponization of hope. You know how they
Mm-hmm.
turn hope into a weapon. I mean, you know,
Fear is used that way. Forgiveness is a tool of manipulation. A lot of
Right, right.
times you are being
especially
told
as
to forgive.
That's
especially
slave
and
code.
and that's also the foundation of the Catholic Church. You know, forgiveness. You know, and all of. But like I said, being a preacher's kid, you know, I've always had problems with the Bible and suffer little children and the whole father son type deal. But anyway, that's kind of getting off the subject here. But
It all for real. It really all goes together because the way that religion is used to manipulate and to kind of keep a people in a whirlwind where they're not even able to see what the hell is going on is the reason why things have remained the way that they have.
well, see, I know if I had been Reverend James E. King the third, see, I would have had a much different life. I know, you know,
I mean,
but
you can become reverend at any time. You can
well,
do that
well,
at any
well,
time.
well,
Well,
when I
well,
was in
being
prison,
James and King, you got
I
that
mean,
twang. You
shit,
throw
he
reverend in
already
front
got
of
it
yeah,
that.
right
King,
there.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
hey,
Just switch
yeah,
the words around.
yeah. Well, hey, actually, I
That's
leave
what
them
they
like
do.
that. I leave them like that and tell them I want my royalties. But that's another. That's another. That's a whole another argument there. You know, yeah, it does seem to me like the more that we want change, or the more that we press for change, the more stubborn that wall becomes. Um, but then again, like the Bible, I don't believe that I can go around the wall singing and all of a sudden it's gonna fall down.
Right.
Well, let me break this down real quick, just in terms of even going back to what we talked about. What does it take to get the next generation or get people to recognize? See, when we talked about how you basically force logic to be outside of your everyday thinking. For instance, in order to believe in the concepts that were taught from religious perspectives, you have to remove critical thinking because some of it just don't add up. But once I force myself to basically accept this over logic, that becomes what was referred to as a habitual pattern of how I associate life in general. So then once I'm in that mode now to where it's easy to take logic and critical thinking out of my spectrum and out of my view by throwing these key words in there, going into hypnotism, then from that standpoint, it's everything else falls right into place. And so therefore you can have a conservative person or people that are in certain positions continue to inundate a person with something that has to do with bogging down their knowledge base. This is why I said keeping us at a position where we're not stimulated by growth, because you can't teach me to believe something that is not true and then also tell me to be stimulated by learning and growing and trial and error, because that's a conflict. So that's how that comes into play. So by the time I'm in my 20s and 30s, again, because my upbringing brought me into a position of where these things had to be the accepted way of life. And if they wasn't, then I'm in trouble, right? And going back to what Quran was talking about the predator thing, it's either predator prey. When we're talking about the polarities, either you for God, which is referred to as Jesus, or you for Satan. Everything else, there is no in between. And so, from that standpoint, when we learn and we're growing and we're even looking into things from how the political system is ran, let's talk now about that concept of the separation of church and state. Now you get into this position to where I have to, put take this and take it and put it off the shelf and pick this one up because this is what pleases my family. This is what pleases my elders. This is how I was taught to do something, and therefore I'ma emulate the same thing and teach my kids the same thing. And the last thing I want to do is be looked upon or viewed upon as wrong. So my critical thinking and my ability to recognize truth. Let's just go back to that. My ability to recognize truth and see it for what it is put on the shelf, and we pass that on. And so that becomes part of our genetic makeup, which is I forget the word now. Now that I can't think about it, but it becomes basically ingrained in our DNA, and we pass that on. So we pass on as a people. This is just natural law in physics. Whatever we become good at, regardless of whether we become good at being a fool or good at being somebody that's intellectual, we become good. You see, good knows it doesn't know how to distinguish between right and wrong from that standpoint. It's just I'm getting good at something. So we become good at being stupid. And so therefore we teach the next generation how to be even more stupider with that net. Everybody evolves and advances in whatever direction they're going in. So if you're going in down the wrong path, now you get good at going down the wrong path, and you set and widen that road to allow more people to go through that tunnel. And that's where we are. And that is what is attractive. You see what I mean? And so we have to reteach our next generation what is attractiveness, what should they be stimulated toward, and
I
in
think
part of
you were referring to epigenetics,
there we go, epigenetics. That's it. Appreciate you. Thank you
and
for the Quran. So
yeah,
go ahead.
epigenetics, and that's the thing. Is like, oh my bad, brother. Yeah, epigenetics is reversible, so it's not even actually in your DNA, but it uh it teaches you how to read a DNA sequence. And so even right there, it's proof in the pudding that your perception of things is gonna be your reality. And so that's another cold part about it, is that if enough of us hopped on board, then we can undo these things, that they don't have to stay there in your DNA. It's not just boom, it's
Right.
just written, and that's it. All these things are reversible, but who's gonna reverse these things? And it goes back into that uh liberator versus runaway slave mentality,
Hmm.
when you got slaves that'll run away and boom, all right, I'm safe. And then what about the rest of the slaves that you just ran from? Uh, Still on the plantation. Well, nah, I made it to the north, so I want to make things better for myself and my family unit. Uh, but we need those Harriet Tubmans to go back over and over again and make
Shit,
sure
but
that
Harriet wasn't
we
getting
get we
everybody.
gain.
Harriet left some people too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Harriet
Yeah.
let some of them people perish. The ones that she and the matter of fact, she was trying to get them, and they almost got her killed. So
Yeah.
sometimes you
Yeah.
cannot. I mean, the ideal situation is to be able to each one teach one, reach one, whatever the case may be. But sometimes it doesn't equate to that, because you have to really be able to save yourself. Like, if you want to reference a place in the Bible, one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible is where it says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan want to have you. He want to sift you as wheat. But I pray not then when you are converted, you strengthen your brethren. So the stronger you get, you got to be strong before you can bring somebody else along. Because if you ain't strong and you trying to carry somebody else, then y'all both gonna fall. Somebody got to get their strength up to sustain. It's like you don't go and move into a house without getting a job. Somebody got to get a solid income before you can go and move into a house. You cannot just go and move into. uh, I've had a lot of relatives, they want to come and move to Atlanta. But if you don't have a plan when you trying to move to Atlanta, then just moving to Atlanta by itself is not gonna help. I'm
Well,
established, but you still have to come here and put your feet in the ground and get established in order for it to really work.
Well, I think that goes back to what we was talking about earlier in regards to like when we was fighting for our quote unquote civil rights, and we got the ability to live next door to them, but what ended up happening is assimilation because we didn't have a real plan, or should I say, those that did have a plan got suppressed, and the mass majority of us did not have a real plan in terms of how to bring our wealth with us. So
I
that
think
goes
that's
right
our biggest
into
problem now is that
right, right,
it's no big plan. Is we are a very
hmm
reactionary people. We
yep,
react to everything. Nothing is like, okay, this is how we gonna etch this out. This is what we gonna work on to have a goal. So where okay, if we know we have this one goal, even if it veer off a little bit, we still, it's not. We're not going this way. But when you don't have anything, any type of planning, any type of preemptive work, okay, what is the strategy? Then as soon as something happens, it instead of just it's just like this, you veering way off, you on Timbuktu, and we ain't even going that way.
yeah. Well, that goes into us not being again critical thinkers and not
Mm-hmm.
understanding social engineering and how society has created us to operate from a domesticated level. Being a operating as a consumer and operating through being domesticated, you're not going to have a plan. That kind of goes into what Quran was talking about when he was talking about with Harriet, the difference between a runaway slave and a liberator. A runaway slave is just going to run. Going to the point is when certain legislation opened and we ran from our neighborhoods, and running from our neighborhoods and running to another neighborhood is called a simulation. You didn't have a plan, you just wanted to get away. You didn't want to solve a problem, you just wanted to get away from the being inundated with the problem. You didn't want to come up with a solution, you just wanted to run away. That's a runaway slave, that's not a liberator, because a liberator basically changes the conditions within their community, not run away from the community. And so that's in essence what we're doing as a people. We're running away from it instead of trying to repair and fix it. So
So
we have to be solution based people.
I believe there is a large. You can't just leave and go without planning, but you do need to leave and go sometimes. It's like Nipsey Hussle.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
He
that's a bad
stayed.
example.
He was trying to be a liberator. You
Yeah,
know what trying to be a liberator got him?
it'll get you killed.
It's
Well,
like a catch-22. So yeah, you be
Yeah.
a liberator, but sometimes you have to step outside of the box. Like that the arm game that
but but
you
but
the arm go down and it picks
Revolutionary
something up and then
suicide.
drop.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes, if you are a leader, and you also have to be able to accept circumstances. Um, and I think, like when you talk about Nipsey Hussle, or you even talk about some of our other black liberators, they all knew that there would be a price for their views, and they were willing to make that sacrifice. The thing I find today is that because of this instant social media, that we're able to create false heroes, because none of these people, to my view, are willing to make the ultimate sacrifices for some of the things that they say out of their mouth.
Well, to me, that goes back to what I talk about, the difference between production and being consumers. A consumer wants to take in but not give out. You see, we're not taught about the value of life and the value of sacrifice.
Well, I'm not willing to
We're
sacrifice
praised
my
that.
life for this. I'm not. I will talk this shit all day till I'm blue in the face. But I got two kids I want to raise. So when I say what I say, normally a lot of things that I say on your show, James, I don't really say publicly. I'm the type of person when I talk about certain shit with politics and all of that. I will turn your phones off, take your phones in another room across the house, and then let's sit in a room where the phones is so far off that even if they was trying to hear, they wouldn't be able to listen. Because I believe that they do be trying to tap in to see who is gonna liberate the people. Because we need to stop whoever the liberators are.
This
Yeah,
this but this
but
goes back to what I'm saying. We have to, but we have to find ways to make the idea of standing up and making and taking a stand for something is what I'm talking about. Versus, again, when you talk about consumption versus production, if you want to stand for something, even if it's a minute amounts, our people have to be willing to change the appetite that they have for not doing anything other than just taking in. In other words, you mentioned earlier that we have to have a village mentality. Keep in mind the way most of us raise our children is what, as individuals, you go to school, you get a good job, so that you can put a roof over your head, and so that your children can go to school, get a good job, put a roof over their head. At
Cycle.
no point are we talking about the community. We're simply talking about the individual and the family, but not the community. As Panthers, we always talk about what we refer to as trifecta. It has to be the individual, the family, and the community all being taught as being inclusive. And when we teach our children to only be concerned about their immediate self and their immediate family, and everything is built around that, what are you doing?
I
So
don't know about that because and the reason why I say that is because um at this point in stage, there's so much deflection on what everybody else got going on that there is not enough tension on ourselves. That's why we're not learning ourselves. That's not
what do
why
you
we're not
you're talking about
pers-
drama though. You're talking about
no,
drama
no,
and
no.
reality.
Outside of drama, outside of that, it's
Example.
still go ahead.
No,
no,
say
it's,
give me an example. Give me an example.
I can't pick out one one in particular, but just in general, um, it the disconnect it runs deeper than just it's not. like I said earlier, there's not one way to fix the problem.
Correct. Correct.
It's got to be a collective of all things. But when you don't look at yourself, we
Hmm.
not the drama of yourself, the reality of self acceptance, because you got
Correct.
to accept yourself before you can reach into the community. And until your house is your first ministry, your home is your first home base. That's
Hmm.
until you can work on building the people in your house. When you build the people in your house, then that's how you go and build the community. Because if I'm built up, then I can teach you something. But if the people in my house ain't built up, then how can I go and tell somebody else something?
Well,
How can I
I
impact the
agree with you.
community?
I agree with you. I'm just simply saying that it really doesn't even come up that you should be obligated to want to make your community better. That's what I'm talking about. We don't even teach the idea of community needs to be part of your structure. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not saying put community over repairing yourself. I'm because we obviously got to deal with what we refer to as dysfunctionality, self dysfunctionality. We got
Mm,
to correct that because as pastors, what we talk about with that is that people bring their baggage to the grassroots movement because they ain't repaired themselves. So oftentimes it's because somebody want to help in the community. If they ain't in the right mind frame, then they're going to actually make things worse. So I completely get what you're saying. What I'm talking about is the fact that how often do we discuss with our children that the reason why we must repair ourselves and repair our families is so that we can incorporate that and repair the community. We don't take it to the community. It's like that's not part of the chain and part of the cycle is what I'm getting at. It's just not taught that that is part of what our obligation as people should be. So the obligation is just to get your immediate family well off and and do good for your children. See that, but that goes back to what Quran was saying earlier
And
about
I
that
think it's
individual
also
mentality. Go ahead.
yeah, I think it's also teaching how to use our muscle. Um and Huey was big on this. You know, if you give a people the worst treatment, the worst food, uh in general, over time, only the strongest, the weak gene lines will phase out, and you have the strongest remaining people left. And so, like the sister was saying, uh it's getting us out of being reactionary, because everyone sees, you know, when all the black folks are pissed off again, and then we had that knee jerk, but you witness the raw power. And so when you take the power of our people and hone that, and you take the givingness of our people and us willing to give, and we start giving to each other, which is really what the party's self-defense was pretty good at with the programs, and tapping into the resources that are already here, because we are our biggest resource. And so it's going to take retraining and training the youth to not necessarily focus on what we're bad at, but focus on the muscle that we do have.
See,
Um,
but a lot of
but
the stereotype of attitudes being bad and all of the negative stereotism, that might not be a word, but it's gonna be a word today.
That's right.
All the things that make us us have been we've been told you shouldn't act like that, you shouldn't be like that, but a lot of that we need it is just being able to balance it out and use it appropriately so that it can
Right.
be used to be effective versus just being mad.
Absolutely.
Okay, you mad,
Yep.
but what you gonna do about it? What actionable steps can you take to turn that anger into something productive?
Right.
And
Channel it.
Hmm.
we missing that part, but that part goes back to when you're young, boys are told not to feel this way, not to act like this, and you're losing your power when you're denying yourself. So a lot of times we want to accept ourselves, but we don't want to accept every part of ourselves, regardless if it's dirty, nasty, stinky,
oh
whatever
yeah,
it is. We have to accept it all to really get the fullness of who we're supposed to be and to tap into our purpose. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about for real, is once you heal, you can tap into your purpose, because now you don't have these things blocking your ability to be able to focus and think about what is necessary. But with no healing, no focus, no acceptance. Because if I'm denying the best parts of me, if I deny my attitude, like my attitude is a part of who I am. I need to be able to be witty with the comebacks, with the smart mouth, and all of that. It's just when am I using it and how am I using it effectively for the greater good versus just cussing somebody out.
Yes, there you go. Well, let's go home and get end the show for the night. Brother Quran, you want to give your final thoughts for the evening, and then Brother Williams, you can kind of take us home.
Yeah, no doubt. At the end of the day, what I say is it comes down to self-determination, but the key word is determined, right? And so uh oftentimes I sit in circles and we figure out all kinds of answers and stuff like that. And I run into 100 brothers in the day, everyone talking about the same thing, but nobody gets in the room and makes it happen. So uh I encourage, anyone listening to just take actionable steps, um and really hit the road running, because we got a saying that we must outpace the pace of oppression. So oppression is working around the clock, it doesn't sleep. And so that's the same attitude that we must have towards ourselves.
Appreciate you, brother Karan. And I mean, and with that, you know,
uh,
all I can say is basically we just have to make sure as a people that we are working on our self repair, and that we do not, deny ourselves the right to be able to stand up and recognize our greatness. Let's go back to what I say all the times in our shows, James, is how uh, they refer to black identity as an extremism. So when we try to define who we are, develop who we are, and then be able to defend who we are, you're an extremist. So we have to define who we are. We can't allow them to call us an extremist. We have to accept the fact that in order for us to repair and go back to the healing that Dr. Casey is talking about, it is up to us to define that and develop that and then defend it, not somebody else. So part of liberation is getting out of the fact that we allow other people to determine our destiny and our path. It must come from us. So I say to the youth, recognize that and live on those principles. Those principles will take you past whatever misconceptions or negative things that you've been taught, you know, subconsciously, that will be continued on and passed on in terms of the dysfunctionality and the baggage that you will carry to the next generation. So we have to define who we are. We have to develop that and then be able to defend that and let that be part of our foundation, so the next generation does not have to deal with that particular aspect of the strife.
Thank you so much, Brother Williams and Brother Quran. Any final thoughts, Dr. Casey, before we get out of here? I hear you. I hear you. I see your lips moving, but I don't hear
Oh.
There we go.
I've spoken a lot tonight. I gave my final thoughts earlier. Again, go pick up my book. It's my time. And you can go visit my website at edu-freedom .org, and I have a lot of faith books and workbooks there available. And you can follow me on my social media, Speaking Freedom and Speaking Freedom TV.
Hey, thank you all. Thank our audience. Look forward to talking to you next Monday, talking more about the role of black conservatives in the race equality game. So have a great night, and
All
we'll
right.
see you next week.
All right.